Welcome to First Responder Financial Freedom Podcast. We talk to first responders all over the nation who are investing and working on businesses outside their first responder jobs. Our goal is to motivate and educate each other and help provide a better financial understanding for a better future. Now here are your hosts, Mike Webb, Tyler Thrush, and Aaron Foster.
All right, we are back today with Melissa Krivachek. She owns Blue Collar Business. She's an advisor. She's been doing it for about 17 years. And there's a whole gambit of stuff that she has in her bio. So I'm not going to waste your time reading the bio word for word. We're just going to dive right in. Melissa, thank you for taking the time out of your 27-hour drive on your way back to Iowa to talk to us for about an hour. So give me the broad overview of what you do and who you are.
I basically work in the blue collar world. I buy, sell, and scale blue collar businesses, and I've been doing that almost 18 years in May. So, super skilled at looking at any business and advising anybody that wants to be in a blue collar business on how to do so and what to look for and how to go about being successful in that.
That's the best 15-second elevator pitch I think anybody's ever given. Usually it's like another 13 paragraphs. So how did you get into this 18 years ago?
Oh, I went to jail for speeding. So I was under the impression that success loves speed. That's actually false. It loves accuracy. So if you're going to make decisions on what to do with your life, you want to make them in a manner that's accurate, not a manner that's based on speed, because speed oftentimes ends in crashes, which you guys know all about. So that's how I got started.
I'm not sure which way direction to go with this, but I'm just going to be nosy. How fast were you going?
It wasn't how fast I was going. It was that I was just completely naive and an idiot, and I got 36 tickets, and then they suspended my license and threw me on SR22, which I just didn't care about. So I just drove without a license and without insurance, and then eventually that caught up to me. But even still to this day, I cannot drive my parents' cars, which is insane to me because it's been 16 years. So
the fastest I ever went was about 170-ish on a motorcycle, and I'll never do it again. That was, especially as I get older, I don't think I'll ever do anything like that again. And the fastest in a car was about 140. And
yeah, I did 212 in my Lambo, but that was in a Lambo.
Where were you?
I can't say.
That means the U.S. when you did it is what you're saying.
That's Baltimore.
No, the freeway in Minneapolis.
Oh, nice. The younger and less wise Melissa is coming out now. Okay.
So prison changed you? Okay.
No. I did not go to prison.
No, but that'll be a great headline for the episode.
Prison 212 miles an hour.
It's not prison. No.
All right, so you've done you've sold, involved in the scaling and selling of 2 8-figure businesses. So I had to use my fingers and count. So that's in the tens of millions of people who want to know what 8 figures is. What do those businesses look like? Like, how did you meet those people and help them scale it? Or was it your businesses?
No, it was my businesses. So One was consulting, which I got a non-compete for. Then I went into e-commerce and I scaled that up to 110 employees. But honestly, I hired my first employee off Craigslist because the other business, I just sold it to clients. So I didn't need to scale to the capacity I did the second 8-figure business. So when I hired her, it literally was just like, hey, you're going to be doing some part-time stuff for me and don't think this is going to be a full-time career. Then it ended up that she became the VP of operations after scaling to 2 warehouses, buying a building in Bogota, Colombia, and having 109 other employees. So, I mean, it starts small and then it grows.
Now the e-com?
Yeah, that was an e-com.
We just had a podcast with Sean Percy Travis a couple of weeks ago, and that's his thing. He left the LA County Fire Department to do e-com as well. So apparently Sean's not full of it, and that there's actually money to be made there. So Melissa just co-signed what you were telling us.
Yeah, we sold that for $27 million. So there's a lot of money to be made in e-com, and that's you don't need to do the math. I mean,
were you the sole owner?
I was not. There was
okay. Well, I'd take a piece of that.
Yeah, there were two of us.
So I just want to make sure I'm following. So you had the speeding ticket thing 16 years ago, like you got out of high school, and then like what was that first like foray into entrepreneurship? I might have missed that part.
Yeah, because we didn't talk about it.
Okay, I just thought I wanted to make sure we just kind of like breezed over the middle and went right to the 27 million after the 27 speeding tickets. So I just want to make sure I'm following.
Yeah. Okay, so my first ever client was a individual in real estate in Florida, and I did a buy one get one free like consulting session with them, and basically it was $100 an hour, but I did buy one get one free, so technically $50 an hour. Back then YouTube wasn't a thing, so I could regurgitate Tony Robbins, Les Brown, Deepak Chopra, the people that were coming around and that were making themselves go from like mainstream on like TV shows or whatever to live stream in YouTube. And nobody knew that YouTube was going to be as big as it is now. Like it literally was just a tool like any other tool we use today, including AI. I mean, I'm sure AI in 17 years will be something huge. But for today, it's just a tool, right? And so I basically just regurgitated what I learned. And then as I got more and more into the businesses, I was able to develop my own systems and operations and ways of going about scaling the business and just information in regards to how to do that.
So did you have a little bit of a background in business when you started this, or was this just like one of those things you just were like, hey man, I went to unleash the power within, I'm ready to go? Like,
yeah, kind of, but it was more or less like I told my dad, fuck off because you sucked at being an entrepreneur, so I'm going to prove you wrong. And I rode that way for a good 10 years. And like, it was basically like, you never told me I'm proud of you, so now I'm going to prove that you should be proud of me. Which eventually you'll grow into the maturity level that you don't really need him to say that. So you should use that as motivation. But yes, that's reality.
That's like
spite success. That's what I would call it.
Harmozy story there.
Prove to you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was the reason why he wasn't successful anyway, because I was the oldest child of four. So once my parents got pregnant with me, that was game over for him. He had to go back into the workforce.
How did you start? So little business consulting, little e-commerce, like how did blue collar business advisors come to be? Like, how did you decide, like, you know what, e-com, you know, I'm going to go towards the blue collar?
Yeah, ecom's super hard to assess in terms of a value because like URLs and Amazon's always changing its rules. So like they can hold your money for as long as you want, whereas blue collar, like it's face to face, it's based on relationships. And these are values that I built when I was, you know, young and growing up in Iowa. And so those are values that I held like close to me. And I think that I just gravitated naturally towards that because that's what I grew up around in terms of where I'm from and like all of that kind of stuff. And so blue collar is much more tangible. Like you can go out and you know what the equipment is worth and you can take a depreciation on that. Like you know what the person is taking in terms of a paycheck, whereas e-com is all over the place. And so it's much more of something that you can keep track of and scale easier than it is e-com.
What type of businesses are you consulting over? Is it all e-com or is it a plethora of things?
You mean all blue collar?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anything from roofing to landscaping, to like restaurants, whatever, like there's really not an industry that I'm not familiar with. There are some industries that I favor highly over other industries. Like I don't like the funeral industry. It makes a lot of money, but funerals aren't my thing. So it just depends on where like good high vibe energy is and good people are. So there's some really good like companies that are run by amazing people who aren't skilled in scaling, but they're skilled at people and they're skilled at labor. And so those are the companies that I enjoy the most.
So how do people find you? Like, how did you scale from this is my business that I helped grow, this is where I'm at, and then you started branching out? Like, how do people know who you are in order to kind of use your services?
A lot of it's just based on referrals, and that goes back to the value of relationships. So it's do good for one person, they'll open their mouth and refer other people.
So are you coming in and just taking, like, for instance, like a plumbing company, and maybe they're a 2-man operation with one truck, do you come in and provide just guidance on how they could be more efficient? Or are you coming in to maybe purchase equity and then kind of almost operate it so that they can be the plumber and you can kind of be the guider? Or how does that look?
Nope. So I don't do earnouts and I don't do equity ever. So basically I will look at the business and I will determine whether it needs to be scaled or they should figure out how to exit. And oftentimes we call this chucking a truck. So chucking a truck is like a one-man guy. He's got himself a job. He's super excited about his job because it pays well. And he continues to show up for clients that call him, whether it's his day job or it's an actual business, doesn't really matter. There's not a lot to sell at the end of chucking a truck, except for the truck and his tools and maybe his list of clients if he got them under contract, and maybe not if he doesn't. So it's really about integrating systems and protocols and ways to communicate with the customer that show that you want them long term. So things as simple as like, if it's plumbing, you can do like a $29 per month commitment, and that shows that you've got an actual business where you have people on contract and you're going out there to evaluate any plumbing issues or whatever. So
like a plumber on retainer.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of, people in blue collar industries, they're good at their skill, they're good at their trade, but they don't really know how to scale like that. And like what you mentioned, it's funny. I have, my dad grew up, when I was growing up, he was a finished carpenter, then a contractor. So I know a lot of plumbers, painters, they're good at what they do. They just don't know how to scale. And now a lot of them are picking up on that service model, the $39, $99 a month to get different things to increase their revenue. And that's why I think a lot of us are in real estate investing where it's really hard to put a value on these businesses because there's not like any true assets that you're holding outside of the real estate. The model doesn't lend itself to that. And I think a lot of our audience is looking for a way to replace their overtime or their shift work, and they're already skilled in the trades. So it's taking the knowledge that they have and coupling it with somebody like yourself who does understand systems, scaling, things like that, in order to produce something at the end of the day, if they need to or when they want to, they can exit. And I follow a lot of your stuff. I know a lot of us have the same problems as people that you're posting. They don't have an exit plan. They're just working every single day. And then they come to you and say, hey, I want to sell for $10 million. And you're like, well, where does that number come from? Like, where are you getting this stuff? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So a lot of times when people come to exit, they're coming to exit with this idea that they have a legitimized business and that they're ready to go. But the problem is that they're putting in all the hours. So unless you're a master carpenter or a master electrician or whatever, like there's no way to determine what the value of the business is because you're taking most of the equity out of the business and you're also taking most of the pay out of the business to just survive and create a lifestyle. So it's really important that you integrate some type of system, whether it's a monthly retainer or a contract for commercial jobs or something else that allows you to remove yourself from the business. But it also is important that you focus on getting W-2 employees. So in businesses like you guys run, a lot of people retain 1099s, and that's fine if you just want to do the truck in a truck model, but it's not fine if you're actually looking to exit. So whether it's one W-2 employee or a multitude of W-2 employees, the W-2 provides the buyer with security, and it also allows you to exit out and transition into whatever it is that you want to transition as they take over your business when you do sell. So yes, it's more costly, and yes, there are tax liabilities that come with it, but it's also a more secure way of like building the business.
One thing you said earlier is that like we've talked about this before. There's virtually two ways to value a business. It's Chuck and his truck and all the things he owns, or it's all the contracts that he has in place that have a value. So like, usually the contracts are worth more money than just the equipment that you have, unless it's a specialty. But 9 times out of 10 for us first responders, our equipment is going to be power washing, landscaping, real estate, stuff like that. So like there's only a certain dollar amount you can put on used equipment versus a contract is going to be a dollar amount that you can sell to somebody else. And I think you mentioned the EBITDA, and a lot of people don't even know what EBITDA is. It's the earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization. So the quickest breakdown is what is the net value of the property. And the market says 10% is a fairly decent EBITDA percentage of income. I don't agree with that. I think 10% is on the low end. But
yeah, I don't agree with that either.
Yeah, everybody's gonna have a difference of opinion what your EBITDA is gonna look like. Can you break that down a little bit more from what I just said?
Wouldn't that depend on the business also? Like
yes.
what's considered acceptable or multiple?
Yeah, so multiples. Okay, so first, there's different ways to do this. EBITDA is one way to do this. There's net NOI, net operating income. You can take a multiple from that too. Or you can just evaluate the actual business and multiply it by the industry it's in. So the first thing is to look at the location. And if it's like a really good industry, or if it's like a industry that is very skilled. So like a doctor would be a higher multiple because there's a lot more like licensing that goes into that, right? So those licenses can't just be traded out. It's the same with electric and plumbing. You can't just pass your electric and plumbing license on to the next person. So the multiple's higher because the skill set is also higher. And the way to get into the trade requires you to actually have a background hours in, and you also need to actually go to school and or get some type of like trade for that. Like you can't just walk in and start being a plumber and expect that you're going to get paid as a master plumber. It's just not going to happen. Or if it does happen, you're not going to have a business because it's not legal. So the way to actually look at this is the location, the industry, the amount of net and gross income. Then you want to take away the owner's salary, and then you look at the tools minus depreciation. And then there's something called goodwill. So goodwill is basically like, what is a customer value to you in the next, let's say, 12 to 18 months? And what does that look like on paper? So that's factored into the multiple. And then FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. If you have real estate, that needs to be determined if you're going to sell it with the business or without the business. I always do that without the business. And the reason I do it without the business is because the business can have its own multiple and the real estate can have its own number. And those two things get taxed totally different. So there's two ways to tax when you take a business to sale. The first is an asset sale, which is exactly what you guys all have. It could be real estate, plumbing, electric, landscaping, whatever. But then there's also what do they call this? Asset and stock sale. So the stock sale is, what e-com would basically be considered. Like you don't own anything tangible, but you have shares that are dividend above and beyond like the partners within the business. So for example, there were two of us that we each held X amount of shares, and those shares were sold off. But again, like when you're scaling these businesses, it's really important to take into consideration how you're going to be taxed at the end, because these taxes will determine how much you're actually going to put in your pocket. So it's not just a matter of scaling a business. It's a matter of scaling a business with education behind each decision, which is why I go back to success loves accuracy. It doesn't love speed.
Let me ask you a question. So we're kind of getting deep into the weeds here of breaking this down. So if I were to look at a business, right, I was going like, we'll say bizbuysell.com. And
Yep.
I don't personally, in the DC market, a lot of places are trying to sell their business with a leased space.
Yeah.
How would I decipher what is a good purchase of a business versus a bad purchase of a business? Should it include real estate? Should it not include real estate? Should it have a lease on it? Should it not? Should it have a contract? Should it have employees? Like, what do you consider a good acquisition to look like?
Depends on a lot of different factors, right? So it depends on the number one factor that this depends on in terms of this question alone is how are you going to finance this? So the SBA 7A is going to look at it completely different than a guy with cash. So if you're going to do seller financing, like that's a totally different conversation. So each of those needs to be taken into consideration, but financing is the answer to how you're going to determine if you should have real estate involved or not, and how you're going to determine whether the business is worth whatever the person's asking or not. Now, what I can say is like your electric plumbing, your blue collar typically goes between 2.5 and 4.5 times the net. So if it's within that parameter, generally it's a good deal as long as there's other things that are looked at in the due diligence process. For web development and SaaS, it's a 10 to 12 multiple. And
for
then,
what? What's the second half? 10 to 12 for what?
SaaS and web development.
Okay.
That's the software as a subscription model, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So I think most of our audience, and I could be wrong, is probably going to be more along the like HVAC, plumbing, electric.
So 2.5 to 4.5. Yep.
Yeah.
2.5 to 4.5. And then solar is a 35 times multiple. That's the highest.
Good God.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why is
I'm
it so
giving
high?
you,
Just because we're just throwing money at it as a country?
How to invest in solar. Let's open up a new tab.
Siri, find me a solar company to buy.
So it's funny you say
Plenty
that. So
of
there's certain company. A buddy of mine has a farm. It's probably a half hour from here, and it's 35 acres with leased land next to it. And he's had a couple of solar companies come to him and say, "Hey, we want to rent your land for $10,000 a month. Blah 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 blah. Let's do a feasibility study. Blah blah blah." So he's like, $10,000 a month. That's better than my crops are doing. So yeah, let's do that. So then they found out that they couldn't sell the energy back to the Pepco. The Pepco is the supplier for energy here. So they decided not to go with it. So like in some areas, yes, you can sell back power to the power company. Other ones you cannot. So this is one of the places that you cannot do it. There's no infrastructure there or something. I'm not sure how it works. But once the government came and said, of course, government coming in, controlling things, government came in and said, you have to use so much green energy, whether it be wind, solar, water, whatever it might be. A lot of companies jumped on this because they can sell that power back to the company. And apparently that's at a 35-time multiple if you were to sell that company, which is astounding. So, yeah. Mike, you and I, Mike, because we go to the same beaches in this area, they're trying to put windmills off of the coast of the Maryland and Delaware coastline. And a lot of people are fighting it because they don't want the obstruction and then the life expectancy of it and a whole bunch of other political versus financial reasons.
Why would the multiple be 35? So I kind of, in my mind, equate multiples to cap rates. So if the multiple is so much higher for solar, that would lead me to believe it's like more volatile. Maybe this is completely backwards. I don't know.
Small Business Association, and what she was talking about was the 7A loans in order to acquire, refinance, improve, stuff like this. There's also ones where you can acquire and have them pay for the real estate, but you have to occupy 51% of it. So when I was asking Melissa earlier about like what are good things to look at and what are not, like I don't want to acquire somebody else's lease on their terms. If I were to start a business, I would want the lease as, depending on what the lease looks like, I would want the lease with the best terms with the lowest overhead because that's going to generate me the highest net on the back end. So when you're buying into some of these businesses, if they have a lease in place, you really want to see what their lease for the real estate looks like because they might be eating up all of your income, your net income on the back end. That's kind of where I was going earlier with the lease versus buying the real estate. It has a higher dollar value if you own it versus that's one of the reasons they used to put it off. So do you want to expand from there so I can stop jabbering?
Yeah, I mean, you do obviously want to own real estate. I own a ton of real estate and all kinds of real estate, from commercial buildings to residential to multifamily to long-term, short-term, and all the things in between. So it's really dependent on what you're looking for when you buy the real estate and how you're going to treat it. I would treat every real estate deal, regardless of the price point, as a investment in my long-term portfolio. I wouldn't try to get into short-term leases because it does, as Aaron said, drag down the value of the business.
Just real quick to go back to that solar thing. Why is solar such a higher multiple even than like the SaaS or software model right now? Is that just because the amount of federal money behind it, or?
That's just the way it is right now. I don't think there's an actual reason, because there's not really a reason to multiply HVAC companies the way that they are, right? So it's just a said thing between the brokers and between those of us that evaluate businesses, that this is 2.5 times and this is 35 times. And so it's not like...
That's just what the market's dictating right now.
It is what it is, yeah.
So obviously you come in, you evaluate these businesses, you provide guidance, but maybe you're somebody that's listening and they have expertise or maybe an interest in a particular trade or a blue collar type of business. Yeah. Like, how would they go about trying to locate something like this? Because I think a lot of people have like interest in this stuff, but it's like, if I wanted to go buy a roofing company, where would I even start?
Okay, well, I have 16 questions that I would ask you before you even get started. So it's not just go to market and find a roofing company. It's like, what is the location that you want to be? How are you going to act? Are you going to be the owner operator, or are you going to be the owner that's absent from the business and put a manager in place? Again, how are you going to finance this? What's the goal in buying this? Is this to put in your portfolio for long term, or is this just to add to your already existing business as a roll up? So it's dependent on a lot of things. And when you determine the reason that you're doing this, then you can determine like how that's going to look for you and where to go looking. So let's just say that you're in, I don't know, Orlando, and you're trying to buy a HVAC company, and you are going to be part of the regular day-to-day operations of the HVAC company. I would literally just put in my, like the MapQuest, basically, like 20-minute perimeter of my house. And I would start looking for HVAC companies that way. So you can either cold call them, or you can go visit them, or you can have a conversation with them if you find them on social media. Or you can adjacently go to places like Biz Buy Sell and stuff like that.
I kind of envision Biz Buy Sell kind of like the LoopNet. You know, most of the stuff that's on there has probably already been offered up to somebody that they had in their pocket.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. It's like LoopNet is where bad deals go to die for commercial.
Yeah, that's true. But we've bought off LoopNet before. And we've also bought off Biz Buy Sell before. So there's a variation of different ways to go about this. So you can obviously go to Biz Buy Sell. You can go to Facebook Marketplace. You can go using Google Maps. You can actually just type in your computer, businesses for sale near me, HVAC or electrical or plumbing or whatever you're trying to look for. And do it that way. That's the long and hard way, but that's the way that I would tell most people, because they don't actually know the parameters of how to buy by themselves, which is why I would always say go back and get somebody that's familiar with contracts or real estate, or how to mitigate all the liabilities that come with this.
Do you work with both the buyer and the seller? Sorry, Todd, I didn't mean to jump on you. Do you work with both the buyer and the seller? Like, if I want to go out and buy this company, do I come to you and you say, this is what you look for?
Mm-hmm. Yep, correct. Yeah. So there's specific questions I will ask the buyer, and specific questions I'll ask the seller, and they're totally different questions.
Okay. Well, and my question was going to go back to what we were just talking about. So the way I think for real estate is kind of what I'm wondering if this would work in what we're talking about, buying businesses. Are you looking maybe for companies that have a terrible web presence? Maybe they're not answering their phone, things like that, indicators that maybe they've been in business for a while, but they're not very professional. There's room for growth. Or is that not how, if I was going to attack it and I have no experience in this, I would be like, okay, who has no web presence, no Google reviews? They've been in business for 30 years. They don't answer the phone. They still have a landline with an answering machine, things like that. In my head, like, maybe this person is ready to sell. Do you look at any of those things? Is that a good way to go about it? Or
yeah, that's definitely a good way to go about it. It's, going to allow you to figure out who's tired and who's ready to exit based on being tired. And because they're tired, you can get a better price. So that's I think one of many strategies to go about that. The other is that they have, 60 trucks and they've got, 200 employees and they've got a secretary that's professionally answering and they follow up with every person to get a Google review. And those businesses are worth substantially more because they already have all of the systems in place and they're already trying to allow themselves to grow at a rate that takes the risk away from them as the owner and allows them to grow into and scale without the sole reliance on themselves.
Okay, so like in our business, we look for as much distress as possible for real estate, whereas in the business, we're not going to track that down because we already have a highly efficient operation. That's something that you said is going to be more valuable. It's going to be more plug and play when you buy it as well.
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on how much capital you have too, right? So if you don't have a lot of capital, you look for the stress because then you can put in systems that won't cost you a lot of money. Whereas if you have a lot of capital, you don't need to necessarily worry about that because then you can just be absentee and continue to scale.
As far as industries you like, I mean, you already talked about blue collar. I know like Cody Sanchez is out there a lot saying that she loves car washes, stuff like that. If you were to give your top 3 businesses as far as blue collar, what you like, what would those 3 industries be?
Netting. I love netting. Anything that has to do with netting. Could be netting like a top golf location or like netting someone's backyard. So that's one business that I like. I do like HVAC. That's a good business to be in.
Literally did not expect the netting thing. You mean like physically hang the net so the golf ball doesn't hit the cars?
So I got a couple friends that own Lifetime Fitnesses and 24-hour Fitnesses and a couple other gyms, and it's interesting to see like the franchisee style of owning a business, like what goes into it. What are your thoughts on a franchise business and how it's set up, and like what can you break that down for us as well?
Depends on the franchise. So there's a lot of franchises that I like and a lot of franchises I hate. So yesterday I was working with an owner in South Dakota to purchase a franchise that's a piece.
But that's one of the things I was going towards was if you start your own business, you don't have to pay franchise fees and a percentage to the franchise owner. You just start your own business. And that's kind of where I was going, was like what makes it a good deal versus not a good deal.
From like what your business offers, if somebody was looking to buy or somebody was looking to sell, like how would they contact you? What does that process kind of look like? Do you interview them to see if like you're even going to be a good fit, or you just...
I wouldn't call it an interview. I mean, I have conversations just like we're having right now. So I think it's really just important to build that rapport and that relationship and ask them really important questions in regards to like why they're making this decision to either buy or to sell, why they are choosing to finance it, whatever way they determine is the best financing for them. And then just walk them through the process of either putting their business for sale or purchasing a new one. And a lot of that comes from either social media, which I'm super active on Facebook only, or just through, reaching out and doing podcasts or emails or texts. Like I put my cell phone and my email directly on the website. So I don't have an issue with people reaching out and saying like, hey, I want to do this or that. Or, hey, I've seen this business and I want to buy it, but I basically need an insurance policy, which somebody called us yesterday. And I thought that was a very interesting analogy. And I was like, that's really good. Yeah, I'm going to use that. So it's basically like, walking through how to determine what the multiples actually should be and then what the valuation should be and then what that's going to look like going forward. So there's like 780 touch points to take somebody from a sale to buying or from buying to selling. So it's really important to mitigate the risk down with all the parties involved because there can often be, the owner, the seller, there can be the brokers, there's the attorneys, and then there's the CPAs and accountants. So there's a lot of hands involved in these type of things.
Who kills the most deals?
The guy with the worst attitude. The guy with the worst attitude.
I was gonna say it's the bankers, but
Honestly, I wanted to say the other brokers oftentimes the deal, but then I was like, let's keep this professional.
yeah. No, I was kind of, but we always say sometimes in real estate it's the appraiser that kills these deals or the inspector that kills these deals sometimes. But do you see more of these types of businesses with, I would imagine, at least some level of owner financing, or are most of them? Yes.
Yeah. So there's a substantial amount that are owner financing now. And the reason they are is because they are wanting to retire or they don't really have a business.
But they want some income still.
Yeah. So like I've got a Christmas tree company, lighting out of Houston and out of Dallas. Both of those don't have contracts, but one of them has 14 car washes that they have connections with that they do lights for every year. So I told them like the valuation can go up if you can get these guys under contract, but now we're out of season. So seasonal businesses like landscaping are also very different because those are things that are taken into consideration when giving a multiple or determining the value of the business.
So did you guys hear that? Like literally there's people that can make money putting Christmas lights on car washes. So they don't ever complain there's not enough opportunity out there. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Pretty cool. And that's one of the questions in the chat. Whoops. Obviously using whatever you're allowed to disclose. What's an interesting project or two you're working on right now?
I've got one for 600 million, and that one is a crazy one because there's a lot of so they do packaging for pet products. So like all of your dog foods, your dog treats, your dog or cat or hamster or whatever. All of that kind of co-packing and stuff like that. And there's a lot of interesting licensings from like Mars and stuff that they needed to get, which you can't just get. So like those licenses are super substantial. Or I've got, like the Christmas lighting companies. I've got a web development company. I've got an oil rig company out of Oklahoma. It's all over the board in terms of what I'm working on right now. There's a guy that wants to do septic tank roll-ups or
and when you say roll-up, you're talking about like he has, Billy Septic and he's going to go buy Jimmy Septic and roll it up and put it under the name Billy Septic, right? Basically just go buy these other mom and pops, roll them up into one umbrella.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, Septic. Don't even get me started on that right now.
Yeah. When he first came to me with this, I was like, are you in somewhere rural? Because this is like the most rural business that you could get. And it's weird because like there's a guy in Idaho that wants to wrap up a bunch of water companies, like well companies. And I'm like, again, and it's interesting because I just did a podcast with him last week. And that's when he proposed this idea. And I was like, okay, I don't know about that, but if that's what you want to do, we can do it.
Idaho is funny like that. I have a lot of my real estate in Idaho, and their water companies are so mom and popish and spread out. When I got my first couple bills, I didn't pay them because I'm like, this is a random company. Who's sending me these bills? And then they called me and said, hey, you haven't paid your water bill. But yeah, Idaho is super interesting. All their water districts are like tiny. They're really outdated, and the whole well system out there is getting taxed big time because of the amount of pressure being put on by the increase in population in Boise. But yeah, I have come from obviously Southern California where water is so established, and out there it's crazy. It's like the Wild West.
Yeah, it's weird because like I bought a property 2 years ago with septic and a well on it, and one of my friends is from Venezuela, and he was like, Venezuela is more established than this property. So it just depends on where you are, and that's why you got to ask certain questions, because depending on where you are can determine a lot of different factors.
It's funny you say that because like one of the conversations we had in the group 3 days ago was like, do you get home inspections? And like Mike doesn't get home inspections anymore, but he does inspections on well and septic because that can be a major expense. And I, for the most part, won't buy a house with well and septic unless I'm switching to public water, public sewer. So like these are things to think about that can ruin a deal for you. I'm glad you brought that up because we're not the only ones. So you co-sign that too. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's true. Like, I also don't buy septic and well anymore. But if somebody wants to buy it as a business, I'm not opposed to helping them through that process because I'm familiar with it. It's just a lot more work than your typical city water sewer hookups.
Yeah. So 600 million all the way down to Chuck in the truck. So
Yeah.
is it just you? Is it just Melissa in the van, or how many different folks do you have as advisors? So like, what does blue collar business advisors look like as a whole?
So I can call on, and I have to because I'm not licensed in any capacity. So I'm not a broker. So I have to call on attorneys. I have to call on real estate agents. I have to call on accountants and CPAs. They're all licensed to look through stuff after I've advised on it. But I also have to take that into consideration because I don't have the licenses. So that's the first aspect of the advisory part of blue collar business advisors. But then I also have a sales team. So they go out and they find businesses that want to sell and or buyers that want to buy. And they're very good at like also just assessing the situation and seeing the reality of the business and or if the owner should be involved or should step away or they should sell or they should not. I would say like before last week or even before this morning, like we didn't do any marketing, right? So my new sales guy who's been killing it, he's like, I want to go high level and I want us to all have the same emails and I want us to all be like in sync. And I'm like, well, that's not really what we do over here because it's so relationship driven. But I've entertained the idea and he has his own email now. We have go high level now. So we'll see how that like takes off. I don't know that I'll be involved in that part of the business, but if it makes their lives easier, I'm happy to buy that for them.
Do you want to grow what you have now, or are you comfortable where it's at? Like, what's your ultimate goal for what you're doing now?
My goal, my goal is to sell this. So eventually I'll remove myself entirely and I will sell off. And that will be my quote unquote retirement, which I'll never retire. I'll just continue to buy businesses, just be owner absentee, or buy real estate and be occupying them with a management company in place. So there's no reason for me to retire because I'm extremely passionate about this and I love what I do, but I also love the value that it brings to the marketplace and being able to just talk with people all day, every day in multitude of different industries about the things that they face because we're all facing these things.
And what kind of acquisitions are you looking at getting into? Like, do you have any specific ones outside of the netting?
So this is another weird one that you guys probably haven't heard of, but exotic food vending machines. So the margin on the exotic foods that go into those vending machines is like $5 for a bag of chips from China or like $5 from some licorice from Ireland or whatever. So those go in places like Breckenridge, Colorado, or like very touristy traps in the United States where you can just like put these weird things in the vending machine that people from outside of the country are there to spend money and they love it because it reminds them of something back home. But there's not a lot of maintenance that goes into that. So yeah, I like odd things.
It'd be like, what is this, a natty daddy?
Oh, I love it. So Irish chocolate is one of my favorite chocolates. So if you can get an Irish chocolate vending machine, by all means, I'll keep you in business.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, Cody Sanchez runs around saying laundromats, car washes, and all that kind of stuff. It's not that those aren't good. They are good. It's just that I feel like I'm not at a point where I want to be hands-on, and a lot of my clients aren't either. So they're either retiring and or they're looking for something to add into their portfolio that's easy to manage and that takes... Like, so I've got a client right now that's buying a gas station / car wash in Suffolk, New York. And so there's 3 people that run that car wash / gas station, and it's completely owner absentee. And this client is from Cancun, Mexico. So they spend their time between Cancun and Colorado. And so they don't have to be there to... the gross on that one is $2.495 million a year, and take home is $60,000, and they're completely okay with that because it's passive hands-off income that they're making from afar. But they're only asking $130,000 for that business, and so
you could get your money back in 2 years, 3 years, 2.5 years. Yeah, that's pretty reasonable, especially if the real estate comes with it. But
I think it's a lease, actually. And these guys came to me and they were like, we only have 75,000 to invest, and I pushed them up to the 130,000. So it depends on like where you're at. So you can only have a little bit to invest. And if you do, you're not going to buy laundromats and HVAC companies and stuff like that. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. So that would be something, and frankly, I'm not the person to answer this, is if I 1031, how close to that like kind does it need to be? Like, I 1031 this real estate sale, and I bought this building that just happens to be housing the HVAC company I own also. Like, you know what I mean? That might be a question that you can answer, maybe somebody more like along the lines.
So you can do that as long as you have a lease to the other business. So obviously, this is not legal advice, so don't take this as legal advice. But yes, you can run a lease from an LLC to an S corp and get away with a 1031.
Okay. Well, not get away with it. Just follow the rules.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Hey, can't you, just to get deeper in the weeds for that one, can't you get a SBA loan for more if you needed it in conjunction with the 1031?
You could. Yes.
I would imagine the capital stack could get pretty creative with these things, because you got owner finance, you got 1031, you got SBA. There's probably a million different ways you can cock this. So
yeah, some people do HELOC.
I know we're coming up on time. Is there anything that we haven't covered you want to cover quickly? We definitely want to make sure we get out and post where it is people can find more about you. I know you said you're on Facebook only, which you said you're pumping out all this content. I was like, well, crap, I need to get on this, because I don't think I follow you. So we need to change that.
And it's super detailed. I mean, like, I go on there. I think I told her when she had asked if there's podcasts she could be on, and I read all of her stuff. I mean, you can, like we were talking about prior to the show, if you want to go and consume the content on her page, you can get a ton of education for free. I look at it every day. There's all different kinds of businesses. So
it's true. Like, I talked about going to Miami.
That's you a friend request, Melissa?
All right, I will accept that. But like, I just talked to a guy, or like, I made a story about how I went to Miami and we thought we were going to buy like a laundry facility, and it was literally just a washer and dryer. But what was crazy about it was there was like Louis Vuitton, Gucci, or Prada, whatever, like on the rack. And these people like legitimately thought they were getting a service, and they were literally just getting a washing machine and dryer doing their laundry, but it looked like it was. And I was like, yo, I can't even. We drove 6 hours for this. I can get a washing machine and dryer in my fucking garage for less money doing this and call it a service. So it depends. And I talk about all kinds of experiences. I just can't get into like extreme detail because obviously it's under an NDA. So, or like I'll post screenshots, but I won't show who's talking to me. So where can you find me? I mean, you can text me 763.
Melissa, if you could.
Oh boy.
763-482-2681 or bluecollarbusinessadvisors.com.
If anybody's got a good audio visual company for sale, we're looking. Well, Melissa, we greatly appreciate your time. Now Aaron's off, so I don't know what's going on here. Russia's hacked into the system again. So we appreciate your time. I know you got a little bit of a drive. It sounds like your puppies are ready to keep rolling, but we greatly appreciate it. Thank you. And now that I have your info in here, I'm definitely going to be consuming this content because it's right up my alley. So thank you.
Awesome. You're welcome. If you guys need anything, let me know. You know where to find me, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you. Safe travels too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.